Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The sound of the washing machine hummed softly in the background, filling the quiet house with a low, steady rhythm. The sun had just begun to dip behind the trees outside, painting the laundry room in shades of gold and shadow. I was bent over, reaching for the last pile of clothes that had slipped to the floor, when I suddenly felt it, someone standing behind me. For a moment, I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I straightened up slowly, clutching the laundry basket against my chest. When I turned around, I saw him, my stepson, standing there in the doorway, completely still, eyes wide, as if caught between confusion and something he didn't know how to explain. The silence that followed felt heavy. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. He was supposed to be at practice, or at least that's what he'd told me earlier. But there he was, framed in the soft light, saying nothing. I tried to laugh it off, to make the moment feel normal, but the air between us didn't change. Something unspoken lingered. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not out of disrespect, but with a kind of uncertainty that made me realize how much time had passed since we'd really talked. He'd only been living with us again for a few months after college, and though we'd always been close, something about him seemed different now, older, quieter, more guarded. The awkwardness in that tiny laundry room made it clear we were no longer just the same people we were years ago. I told him to grab the rest of the clothes from the hallway, trying to sound calm, but even my own voice betrayed me with a slight tremor. He nodded and moved closer, and for a moment, the air shifted again, like time had slowed down, like something important was about to happen, but neither of us knew what. Maybe it was just the echo of old memories, or maybe something new was beginning that neither of us had expected. As he handed me the last piece of laundry, our fingers brushed, just for a second, and it was enough to send a strange mix of emotions rushing through me. I pulled my hand back quickly, pretending not to notice, but I could feel my heartbeat in my chest. He gave a small, uncertain smile before leaving the room, and I was left standing there, trying to understand why such a simple moment felt anything but simple. Later that night, I found myself replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Was it just my imagination, or had there been something else in his eyes, something he wasn't ready to say? Maybe you've had a moment like that too, a glance that lasted a second too long, a silence that said more than words ever could. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have ignored it, or tried to understand it? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, that small moment in the laundry room replayed in my mind, the way he looked at me, the hesitation in his eyes, the quiet that filled the space between us. It wasn't what he did, it was what he didn't say that kept echoing. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, just an awkward moment that meant more in my head than it really did. But deep down, something about it felt different. The next morning, the house was quiet. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone. For a moment, I hesitated in the doorway, watching him. He looked so grown up now, yet there was still that trace of the boy I used to remind to clean his room or finish his homework. Time had changed both of us, and maybe that's what made everything feel so unfamiliar now. When he noticed me, he smiled softly, like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. "Morning," I said, forcing a smile as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "Morning," he replied, voice low but calm. "About yesterday. I didn't mean to startle you." I laughed a little, trying to make it easy. "You just surprised me, that's all." He nodded, but the silence that followed felt heavy again. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it wasn't normal either. There was something fragile about it, like one wrong word could break whatever quiet understanding we had. I changed the subject, asking about his plans for the day, and he told me he was meeting some friends from college. Still, even as he talked, I could tell his mind was somewhere else. As the day went on, I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry, cleaning the living room, cooking dinner, but his face kept slipping back into my thoughts. Maybe it was just nostalgia. Maybe I was reading too much into a moment that meant nothing. But why did it feel like something had shifted between us? That evening, when he came home, it was raining hard. He was soaked, hair dripping as he stood by the door, smiling sheepishly. I handed him a towel and told him to change before he caught a cold. He thanked me quietly, his voice softer than usual, almost uncertain. Later, as I sat on the couch, he joined me with a blanket draped over his shoulders. The sound of rain tapping on the windows filled the silence. We talked, just small things, about life, about how strange it felt to grow older and realize how fast time passes. It felt easy for a while, but underneath that ease, something else lingered. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke. The moment stretched, quiet but charged, like the pause before a confession no one was ready to make. I looked away first, pretending to check my phone, and he smiled faintly, as if he understood. What was happening between us wasn't something either of us could name yet, but it was there, growing quietly in the spaces between words. The following days felt like walking through a quiet storm. Everything seemed calm on the surface, but underneath, something was shifting. I noticed the small things first, the way he lingered a little longer in conversations, how his eyes sometimes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking, how the space between us in the house felt smaller than it used to. It wasn't anything he said outright, but the silence between us had started to mean more than words ever could. One evening, we ended up cooking dinner together. It had started as something simple. He offered to help chop vegetables while I handled the rest. The kitchen was filled with the soft clatter of dishes and quiet laughter when he made a mess with the sauce. It should have been ordinary, but it didn't feel that way. Every glance, every shared smile carried a tension we both avoided naming. Maybe it was just the comfort of being seen, or maybe it was something more complicated, something neither of us wanted to admit. After dinner, he asked me about my life before he moved back home, about what it felt like to live alone, to have quiet evenings without anyone around. His questions were gentle but thoughtful, like he was trying to understand a part of me he'd never seen before. I told him the truth. It was peaceful, but also lonely sometimes. He didn't say much after that, just nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. But not everything felt simple. A few days later, his father mentioned that his son seemed distant lately, distracted even. I felt a small wave of guilt rush over me, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Still, the thought lingered, was I part of the reason he was pulling away? At night, when the house grew quiet, I'd catch myself overthinking everything, his words, his tone, even the way he looked at me when we spoke. It was confusing. I knew there were boundaries, lines that shouldn't be blurred, but emotions aren't always as neat as we want them to be. One night, after a long conversation in the living room, I noticed how close we were sitting. The room was dim, the only light coming from the TV that neither of us was really watching. When he reached to grab the remote, his hand brushed mine again, just like that first time in the laundry room. Neither of us moved for a second. Then he looked at me, eyes searching for something he didn't dare say out loud. I stood up quickly, pretending I needed water, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. The days that followed felt like holding my breath without realizing it. Every interaction carried a quiet weight, as if both of us were trying too hard to act normal. We talked about small things, his job search, weekend plans, the weather, but underneath every word, something unspoken kept stirring. It was like being caught between what was right and what felt real. One night, a storm rolled in. The power flickered, the rain came down hard, and thunder echoed through the house. He came downstairs when the lights went out, flashlight in hand, his hair slightly messy from sleep. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm but soft. I nodded, even though my heart was racing a little too fast. We sat together in the living room with only candlelight between us, the shadows stretching across the walls. The sound of rain filled the silence. It was the kind of moment where time slows down, when everything around you fades except the person sitting across from you. He looked at me, his expression serious this time, not playful or uncertain. "You've been different lately," he said quietly. "So have you," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. He didn't look away. "Is that a bad thing?" For a second, I didn't know what to say. The question hung in the air, heavy and real. I wanted to tell him that it scared me how natural this felt, how comfortable, how familiar, yet completely new. But I didn't. Instead, I said the only thing that felt safe, maybe it's just the weather. He smiled, but there was sadness in it, like he knew I was avoiding the truth. A flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by thunder that shook the windows. I got up to check if everything was fine, and he followed, insisting on helping. When the wind pushed the front door open, rain sprayed inside, and we rushed to close it. In that small moment, both of us standing close, soaked from the rain, everything we'd been avoiding came rushing back. The air between us felt charged again, like it did that first day, but stronger, heavier, impossible to ignore. He looked at me, eyes searching, as if waiting for me to say something, anything, to make sense of what we both felt. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the storm. I wanted to step back, to say something that would make it all easier, but I couldn't move. The storm outside raged louder, but the silence between us was louder still. It was the kind of silence where everything could change with just one word. And just when it felt like that word was about to be spoken, his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the moment. He hesitated, glancing between me and the phone, uncertainty written across his face. He stared at the phone for a long moment as it kept vibrating on the table, the screen lighting up the dark room in short, sharp flashes. The storm outside hadn't eased, the thunder rolled across the sky, the rain pounding against the windows like it was trying to get in. I watched him hesitate, caught between whatever was waiting on that call and the moment that had just almost happened between us. When he finally answered, his tone changed instantly, steady, serious, a voice I didn't recognize. He stepped away, pacing near the window as he spoke. I couldn't hear the other person, but I could tell from his face that it wasn't just a casual call. He frowned, rubbing his forehead, nodding slowly as he listened. "Yeah, I'll be there first thing tomorrow," he said before hanging up. When he turned back toward me, there was something distant in his expression, like a wall had gone up again. "That was my dad," he said quietly. "He wants to talk about something important." I felt a small pang of unease. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He shrugged, forcing a faint smile. "Yeah. I think so." He just sounded serious. The room felt colder after that. Whatever moment we'd been building toward had slipped away, replaced by a strange tension neither of us could explain. He went upstairs soon after, saying he needed rest, but I knew he wouldn't sleep. Neither would I. The next morning, he left early. I stood by the window, watching him drive away through the fading rain, wondering if that call had changed something bigger than either of us realized. Hours passed before he came back, and when he did, he looked unsettled, like whatever conversation he'd had hadn't gone well. We sat down at the table, both pretending not to notice the distance between us. Finally, he sighed and said, "Dad knows something's off." He kept asking if everything was okay at home. My stomach tightened. "What did you tell him?" "I said we're fine," he replied quickly. "But he doesn't believe it. He said he might come home this weekend to talk to both of us." That single sentence changed the air in the room. His father coming home meant everything would be under a microscope again, the quiet dinners, the long conversations, even the smallest glances. Suddenly, what had felt confusing but safe now felt fragile and dangerous. As the day went on, I could sense his restlessness. He'd walk through the house, start to say something, then stop. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to talk about what almost happened that night, but now it wasn't just between us anymore. There was the weight of what people might think, what it might mean, what it could destroy. That evening, as I folded laundry in the same room where all of this had started, I heard his footsteps behind me. It was quiet, just like before. I turned around, and there he was, standing in the doorway again, that same unsure expression on his face. For a heartbeat, it felt like time was repeating itself. "I can't stop thinking about that night," he said softly, almost whispering. His words hung in the air like a confession neither of us knew how to take back. Before I could respond, a car pulled into the driveway, the headlights cutting across the living room wall. We both froze. He looked toward the window, realization dawning on his face. "It's him," he said. "Dad's early." The silence that followed was sharp, filled with the weight of everything we hadn't said yet. Now, everything that had been unspoken would have to stay hidden, or come to light in the most unexpected way. The sound of the front door opening cut through the silence like thunder after lightning. His father's footsteps echoed in the hallway, steady and heavy, the kind that carried authority even without words. I felt my heart race as I quickly set down the laundry basket, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. My stepson looked at me, eyes wide, torn between panic and guilt. Whatever we were, or weren't, was about to face reality. His father stepped into the room, his coat still damp from the rain, his expression unreadable. "I didn't mean to surprise you both," he said quietly, looking from me to his son. "I just needed to see things for myself." For a moment, none of us spoke. The air was thick with tension. Then, he looked straight at me. "He's been different lately," he said softly. "And I know when something's off. I wanted to make sure everything's okay here." I forced a calm smile. "Everything's fine. We've just been adjusting since he moved back." His son stepped forward, his voice steady but cautious. "Dad, it's not what you think. I just needed time to figure things out." The older man studied him carefully, then sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from both love and exhaustion. "You've grown up too fast," he said. "And sometimes, when people grow, they get lost for a while." For a moment, it felt like the storm that had been building finally began to fade. The air softened, the tension thinning. But then, his father turned back to me, his gaze lingering longer than expected. "And you," he said gently, "you've been holding this family together longer than anyone gives you credit for." There was something in his tone that caught me off guard, warmth, gratitude, and something else, something deeper. He looked between the two of us again, his expression changing slightly, as if he understood more than either of us had said out loud. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. "I think it's time I told you both the truth," he said quietly. "There's something I've kept from you." We exchanged confused glances as he continued. "When I said I was working late these past months, I wasn't. I've been trying to get the house appraised. I'm planning to sell it and move us somewhere new. A fresh start." The room went still. His son's jaw tightened. "You're selling the house? Without telling us?" "I thought it would be easier that way," he replied. "But seeing you both now, maybe I was wrong." It hit me then, the house, the quiet moments, the unspoken feelings, they were all temporary. Everything we'd built, even the silence, would soon disappear. The tension that had defined us didn't end in chaos, but in a bittersweet truth. Sometimes the hardest endings aren't about breaking apart, they're about learning to let go before you lose everything. The decision to sell the house changed everything. For days, the air in the home felt different, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves knew they were about to lose the memories they held. He spent his time sorting through boxes, planning for the move, while his son and I tried to adjust to the idea of starting over. What had once been filled with tension now carried a strange sense of peace, like we were all finally learning how to breathe again. My stepson and I never talked about that night again. Maybe we didn't need to. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore, just thoughtful. Sometimes, when our eyes met, there was a quiet understanding that things could have gone differently, but maybe it was better this way. Some connections aren't meant to be lived out, they're meant to remind us that we're human, the flawed, hopeful, and capable of feeling deeply even when we know we shouldn't. His father finished the paperwork by the end of the month. The day the moving trucks arrived, the house looked emptier than ever. Before leaving, we stood together one last time in the living room, the same place where so much had been left unsaid. "You've been the heart of this home," he told me softly. "Wherever we go next, I hope you come with us." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. But then I smiled, realizing that maybe this was the new beginning we all needed, not by running away, but by moving forward. As the car pulled away from the driveway, I looked back at the house one last time. Every corner, every echo of laughter, every silence, it all stayed behind. What came next was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt okay not to know. Sometimes, life's biggest lessons come from the moments we almost lose ourselves in what we can't have, and find strength in letting go.